Starfleet Federation fleets. Composition, fighters. We'll take a look at the ships involved in these fleet dynamics. We'll take a look at the fighters themselves, and I'll let you decide if this is a misuse of Federation assets or is it a viable weapon. I'll let you guys decide. Federation fighter fleets are part of the front line, but they're not actually in the front line. They're actually in the rear, and they're designed just to bring support to the front line. The idea behind this is where the front line is weakening or needs to push, you're going to send those fighters. They're going to be counters to the Jem'Hadar fighters. They're going to be counters to the Hadikis, the fast, quick, swift-moving starships of your enemies. This is where the fighters come in, and this is their primary role, is frontline logistical support. So just in case you guys haven't seen, we have done some alterations to how things are calculated, and one of the big calculation differences is with torpedo technology. Back in the day, how I was doing it is every single phaser a bank was getting represented by a single representation of its power output. So in this power output, we're pretending it has 3 phasers. It's 195, obviously 65,000 per phaser. So torpedoes are being modified, and instead of each torpedo component like phasers representing 1 hit point or 1 box, we've decided to change them to volley. So how many times that particular torpedo can actually fire is how much power it's going to represent. So the reason for this is very large capital class ships were looking much weaker than what they should based on the old data tables. So the new data table is just going to represent phasers the same way, disruptors the same way. The only alteration is torpedo technology is being modified and will now represent the full volley. So if, for example, if you're Galaxy class, your one single torpedo launcher, which would have been 171,000, is now represented on our scale for 1,710,000, which is representing the full volley of that unique weapon. Alright, so Federation fighter fleets are pretty simple. They're Curry, Constellation, and Akira. So the way that they're going to work is the Akira is going to be the flagship of this unique fleet. It's also the most valuable target. It's the target that all the other ships are going to be protecting. It's your most valuable asset. Now, we're going to learn about the ship's offensive capabilities as well as the amount of fighters they carry. But for right now, we're just going to talk about the dynamics of the fight itself. So you have 2 frontline forces and you have 2 incoming Jem'Hadar forces. Now, one of those front lines is going to collapse. So in order to keep that front line from collapsing, which is similar to our reserve fleets, they're going to be supplementing and they're going to be helping the front line. So what's going to happen is the frontline forces that are just nothing but older vessels, they're going to collapse underneath the massive and very maneuverable Jem'Hadar fighters. So what we're going to do is our support fleet is going to then send the fighters to support the collapsing front line, and while they're doing that, they're going to engage at long range the secondary fleet. So the primary use of fleets like this is, first off, carrying their fighters is their number 1 asset, and it's going to bring the most amount of damage to the battlefield. Next, they can separate their forces and they can actually support more than 1 line. Now, those fleets, part of the reason that they exist and they're in the dynamics they are, is that the Akira is also a long-range torpedo support vessel. Now, the Constellation can fire up to 6 old torpedoes. It's old technology, and obviously our Curry classes, they too can fire torpedoes, but they're limited to only 2. So most of our fire support is going to come obviously from the Akira, and then secondly is going to be coming from the Constellation classes. This is going to allow us to engage 2 fleets at once. So separating your forces like this has logistical causes and reasons. So for an example, you don't want to be, hammered and anviled, which is a strategy where you're being attacked from the front and the back. Now, obviously, if the frontline forces, which are our top forces, fall apart and crumble, then that means that we can be flanked. So these kind of dynamics and these kind of supports that where they're attacking both fleets is really important. So the fighter fleets are going to help that front line at least hold the line for a while the Akira and its supporting ships are going to torpedo the crap out of those capital ships. And they're going to obviously hit ships that are, anything that they can. And this is going to allow the bottom fleet, which is similar in power to the same bottom fleet on the bottom, but now that it's got this additional torpedo barrages coming in from the Akira and its supporting vessels, it's just going to give it that much of an oomph. So if we would not have the Akiras in this picture and just the front line, would have lost our top line and we would be holding our bottom line. But then once the top line collapses, then the Jem'Hadar would have been able to hit you with the remaining forces, and then both lines would have crumbled. So using fighters and the long range capability of the carriers of the fires is going to give us the ability to help two front lines. Now this is a really, really efficient way of using vessels. Now, so let's talk about why these ships are able to do what they're doing. We'll bring down all their stats and we'll review the ships and what they were doing. Alright, so we'll be looking at the Runabout. We'll be looking at the Peregrine fighter. So the Peregrine fighter is the most common fighter used with these vessels, and so the Peregrine fighter has a crew of 2, has a mass of 29 extra tons, 18 meters long, has an attack value of 273,000, shields 156,000, hull value 57, and a full defense of 213,000. Has 2 Type 8 phaser emitters that are hitting for 13,000, has a volley of 12, which gives it overall attack value of 156,000. Now it also carries 1 micro torpedo launcher. The power of a micro torpedo is around 32,500. It can hold 6. It has a burst fire technology, which allows it to fire all 6. It also has 1 Type 6 phaser emitter. This is a new generation Type 6 phaser emitter, and it is hitting for 52,000. It has a volley of 3 shots. So let's take a moment to talk about the weapons. So obviously our micro torpedoes are going to hit for 195,000. That's pretty decent. This weapon would be really good with either trying to just bring down the shields of a large capital ship, or if something's shields have already collapsed, the torpedoes would do a lot of damage to the primary hull. Now, its primary weapon is going to be those Type 8 phaser emitters. Obviously, they fire pretty consistent bolts. They're pretty strong. And at 156,000, that's a pretty impressive amount of damage coming from a small ship. Now, when it's doing its strafing runs, this is definitely going to be its primary weapon. Alright, and then obviously it has 1 phaser Type 6. So a phaser array system Type 6 can fire 3 times, 156,000. That's a really powerful, almost like a shotgun. So at 52,000 per shot, this would be really good if the shields have collapsed on a ship and you just need to do massive damage really quick and you don't have time to strafe back and forth. You're just going to get those shots in really quick. Or if you're wanting to one-shot something like another small fighter, this would be pretty efficient. So overall, the Peregrine fighter, its weaponry is rather impressive for a ship of its size. It can basically adapt to the battle situation, and it can use whatever weapon it needs to for whatever situation it's in. Now, I do want to note that I am aware that these ships are capable of carrying straight-on photon torpedoes or quantum torpedoes under their wings, but we're not calculating that into the standard fixture because we don't typically see that. Alright, so we're talking about the Constellation class. It's a really old ship, but it's unique. One of the things it was designed to do is carry a lot of worker bees and things of that nature. It was reconverted to carry lots of fighters. Now, of the 3, this one actually carries more fighters than any of the others. Now, that might seem strange because obviously of the 3, it's the smallest, but its actual saucer section is relatively large for a ship of its size, and we'll do a comparative analysis of the Excelsior class, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So, the other thing about this ship, it's capable of launching 6 torpedoes, so it can give long distance support. Now those torpedoes are older generation technology, not up to modern standards, but the ship's shielding, not very great. Its hull is really impressive though. So it can take a decent amount of hits, especially once its shields go down. And so that's one of the reasons why it was used for this fleet, is because of its holding capacity. It can hold 40 fighters. This is way more than any of the other ships. So like I said, its actual internal structure, its actual saucer section is unusually large for a ship of its age and generation. It's more equivalent to the Excelsiors. So, and when you go and you look at the actual size, and you can see there's a pretty good distinction between the Excelsior, obviously the Constellation, and then underneath there, that's one of the random Miranda variants. Its actual size is almost twice that of the Miranda variant. So basically, this ship was a perfect choice for carrying fighters. All right, so let's do a full breakdown. Let's take a look at the ship. So Constellation class Stargazer is one of the ships that we all know. It started in 2275. They're produced up until 2333. They're 310 meters long. It has a crew of 310. It can evacuate 1,500 crew if necessary, and if it doesn't carry fighters, it can carry 3,500 people. It's capable of, it's been upgraded to go to warp 9.2. Its cruising speed is 5.2, and it carries, like I said, 40 fighters. The ship itself is 325 metric tons. Has an attack value of 598,000, shields 429,000. Its hull value is 692,000, and it has a full defense of 1,121,000. Has 6 Type 8 dual phaser emitters that are 13,000 each. Has 4 Type 8 phaser emitters, which are 13,000 each. And like the dual emitters, they could fire 12 times, which is equivalent to 156,000, just like its fighters. It carries 4 torpedo tubes, and each torpedo tube is around 65,000 point scales of damage. It has a full volley of 6, which means that it could fire a torpedo barrage for support of 390,000. So, looking at the stats, as far as weaponry go, it's pretty decent. When we look at the shields, they're subpar. Its hull value is stronger than ships of its class and ships of its era. But overall, being able to carry 40 fighters will definitely make up for those weaknesses. Now, this ship in our fleet logistics is going to be in the front, and it's going to be using those torpedoes to attack the enemy, and it's also going to give some logistical support to, obviously, the main cruiser, which would be the Akira. Alright, so now we know about the Constellation. Now let's learn about its sister ship, which is going to be the Curry. Now, the Curry ship doesn't carry the amount of fighters that the Constellation does, but what it does make up for lack of fighters, it does have superior weapons. So this ship is obviously designed off the Excelsior, and it's got some hybrid parts from other ships. And so let's take a look at that. So the Curry class has a crew of 290. Its mass is 1,270,000. It's 383 meters, so it's a pretty big ship, and it carries only 16 fighters. Has an attack value of 490,000. Its shields are 780,000. Its hull is 350. Its defense is 1,130,000. It has 18 phaser Type 9 emitters that are hitting for 20,000, and it carries 2 standard torpedo launchers. So right off the bat, this ship's shielding is significantly better. Its hull value isn't. So this is just using standard Federation Excelsior class parts, and so they are not as tough as the Constellation class. Constellation class has got a very thick armor, so that's a real big difference right there. Obviously, this ship can hold into a fight a little bit longer. It's got a lot better shields, and its weaponry is significantly better. It's got twice the firepower as its Constellation counterpart. Now, in the fleet, the reason why this ship is there is it's going to bring some additional fighter support, but it can also fight, and it can also defend the Akira if necessary. So if something breaks the line where the Constellation class is going to struggle, the Curry class is a little more advanced and could give up a better fight. So I want to kind of show you this little cue cord that I had made originally for the Curry. I did make a mistake with the torpedo technology, so that's why I didn't use this, but on this one, I showed the possibility of the 16 fighters and showing you how much attack value you're getting. 2,448,000. So think about this when I show you this next slide here of how this could be used as a projection of power on a small scale battle. So imagine you're in a situation where you're dealing with ships and you are outclassed, but since you have these fighters, you can literally flip the battle. So imagine yourself you're in a situation where you have, 2 starships and you have one of these Curry classes with you, and then you're being attacked by 2 Jem'Hadar fighters and they're being supported by Galor Type 3. So you're completely outclassed. In a normal circumstances, you would have lost. But because you're carrying all these fighters, what you can do is you can then launch the fighters. You can launch the fighters to actually intercept the Jem'Hadar fighters. Once the Jem'Hadar fighters have been destroyed, you can then have those fighters as well as your cruiser continue to engage the Galor Type 3 as one cohesive unit. And they can quickly overwhelm the Galor Type 3, disable it or destroy it, and then where you would have lost this battle, you are now become victorious because you were able to overwhelm the enemy with these advanced fighters. So the Peregrine fighters are definitely a support unit, and they gave a great amount of utility to an attack group. The overall utility of being able to use these swarm tactics on larger ships is almost undescribable. You could quickly overwhelm a superior ship by the sheer numbers of fighters, and you can destroy even a capital class starship using these small vessels. And if you lose 2 or 3, it's not really that much of a loss for you. You're losing only a few pilots and you've lost a few phaser arrays. On the other hand, it brings so much utility and power to your enemy that it's almost unfair. So another tactic you could use is you don't have to keep them with the primary front line. You could just send them out to do dive bombing attacks like what we've seen with Deep Space Nine. So like everyone knows, war is chaos, and the more chaos you can commit on the battlefield, the better it is for you and the worse it is for your opponent. So these fighters are just another avenue of chaos. Now, amidst the battlefield and the chaos of war, there is one more ship that we need to talk about, and it's the one that you've all been waiting for, the Akira. Now, the Akira class is the key to the fleet's success. It may not carry the most fighters, but it's a powerful, powerful ship. So, obviously, we can see that the Curry class is carrying 16, our Constellation is carrying 40, and then the Akira is in the middle with 24. So the Akira class is 464.43 meters. It has a crew of 500, a mass of 3,555,000. It's capable of warp 9.8. It has 12 fighters and 6 runabouts with a total of 24. It has 13 torpedo launchers, which are capable of launching burst fires of 10 shots. Each torpedo is modern and is a 171 point scale of damage. The ship also carries 4 quantum torpedoes, which are 325,000, typical volley of 2, and it has 6 phaser type 10 arrays for close range combat, which are hitting for 65,000 point scales of damage. All its weapons together give it an amazing and overwhelming firepower of 25,213,000. Its shields are that of a Galaxy class at 1,755,000. Its hull value is reinforced and armored, giving it a value of 3,120,000. It has a full defense of 4,875,000. So overall, this ship is an absolute beast. Alright, so now we have all the data. Let's kind of talk about what this ship is doing. So this ship is obviously your command ship in these fleets. It's obviously going to give some fighter support, but besides that, it's got another trick under its sleeve besides the fact it is absolutely bristling with torpedoes everywhere. This ship has another secret. It is loaded with runabouts. Alright, so runabouts are spectacular. So a runabout is 23.1 meters. It has a crew of between 4 to 12. It's capable of warp 5. Its mass is 100 metric tons. Has an attack value of 442,000. Its shields are 156,000. It has a hull value of 195,000, giving an overall defense value of 351,000. Now, with that being said, it could have a combat module on board the ship, and if that is the case, its shields become 1,083,333. And if that's not enough for you, the ship has 6 Type 6 phaser emitters. It's able to carry 1 torpedo tube, and that is launching up to 4 normal-sized photon torpedoes. And then on top of that, it has 2 micro torpedoes. This ship is absolutely bristling with weapons. So imagine this scenario. You're a Dominion commander. You're winning the battle. You've just taken out a Galaxy class. And then the reinforcements show up. And what is it? It's an Akira. So just think about this. You have the Akira you have to deal with. Then you have these 6 runabouts. And imagine that the 6 runabouts are all having the weapon module. It's literally like you have 6 small starships to deal with. And then if that's not enough, then you have the 12 fighters. Together, they have enough firepower that is almost equivalent to a Galaxy class. So, you're fighting the Akira. It is unbelievably powerful. You got to fight all those fighters, which are bringing you enough firepower to be equivalent to almost a Galaxy class starship. And then you have a fleet of small destroyers, basically, within one single ship. Yes. Fighter support on my old formulas was a joke. With the new vamp and the new understanding, they are amazing. So my old analysis, didn't have any data on the Runabout, and I only had data on the Peregrine fighter, and it was only the Peregrine fighter when it was fighting against the Galor when it gets blown up, which is towards the middle of the war. We knew that Galor was much stronger than what I gave it, but because I didn't have data to evaluate the battle between the Peregrine and the Runabout, I didn't know how to calculate it. After watching Deep Space Nine, we've seen several runabouts fight Dominion bug ships. We were able to acquire how powerful they are. And then based on how long that ship could shoot when it blows up a Jem'Hadar fighter, we were able to calculate how powerful a Type 6 phaser was. And then after that was done, then I was able to figure out what the actual weapon value and what the actual defensive values of the Peregrine fighter was. I knew that my data was wrong, but I didn't have enough data to know how to correct it. And now that I have finally finished it, just so you guys know, this was like a fan project for me. I had always wanted to know how powerful the Runabout was and how powerful the Peregrine fighter was, and it was one of those things that eluded me up until recently, and now that I know, it is awesome. Thank you for watching Trek Wars. If you like this material, please subscribe and make a comment. And with that being said, victory is life.